So Nina Turner lost her election to Chantel Brown yesterday, and so expectedly, there are a lot of people playing the blame game, and honestly, a lot of her supporters, people on the left, they sound just like Hillary Clinton supporters when she lost in 2016, pointing the finger at everybody else except for the candidate, except for the campaign. It's everybody else's fault, and whatever fault you do find in the campaign is some minor petty thing that ultimately doesn't get to the root of why that campaign failed. And people are doing that again with Nina Turner. They are pointing fingers at people who were criticizing Nina Turner. They're pointing fingers at of course, the corporate money that was thrown into the race, and I really disagree. I want to push back on that framing. Of course, on the first excuse of us being people like myself who criticize Nina Turner, but also want to push back on the idea that it was just corporate money. Oh, that's it. Nothing else to see here. It's just the corporate money where we lost. Nina Turner raised like over $4 million, and that is almost unheard of in a congressional race, much less a special election. So money wasn't an issue for her, and even if Chantel Brown, like from like the super PACs, the outside spending on advertising, whatever, if you add all that up and it still manages to surpass Nina Turner, it's not like some crazy amount where the that's insurmountable and there's no way you can win by doing the work necessary to bring out voters. So that excuse is trash, and people throwing that one around. And I think it's incredibly important to do some introspection here, because I was calling for this before the election even happened, because a reassessment of this whole funneling endless amounts of money into these elections to advance the career of a politician who's going to go to Washington and not change a goddamn thing anyway. So I was saying that this is a terrible use of resources that could have been better used funding mutual aid and direct actions to, one, actually help people, and two, advance our policy goals with public pressure campaign, which, like I always say, is the only option we have left. And this whole electoral strategy isn't going to get Medicare for all to deal with the emergency right now. So I was making those criticisms before, but now it's also important that we have this conversation to this autopsy of the Nina Turner campaign, so that we stop doing this shit. And I'm seeing a lot of people doing whatever they can to avoid any introspection, to avoid any real criticisms of how Nina Turner ran this campaign. And honestly, she ran a shitty campaign. She ran a terrible campaign. And a big part of that is because there were criticisms of her in her campaign. People were skeptical of her and this new shift to be this loyal team player, Democrat bullshit, partisan. People were criticizing that. We were criticizing whether or not she was actually willing to challenge power when she got elected, if she was already pandering to them before she got elected. And these were legitimate criticisms. These were very loud criticisms. And everybody was aware of them. All the people who did all in new media who did nonstop pro Nina Turner propaganda, they were all aware of these criticisms. Nina Turner's campaign, all aware of these criticisms. And they chose to not engage with those criticisms, and they chose not to explain, and they chose not to correct course, and they dug their heels in on this Jeff Weaver strategy. And yes, I said Jeff Weaver because Nina Turner hired Jeff Weaver to be her campaign advisor. They dug their heels in to this pandering to centrist voters, to Biden voters, and that cost them this election. Because at the end of the day, like 700,000 people are registered to vote in that district, and I think maybe like 80,000 people showed up, 70,000 people showed up. So there's a huge chunk of the population that decided not to come out to vote. And it's because they weren't excited to come out to vote. And I think a big reason for that is because Nina Turner was trying to sell herself as just a regular ass Democrat. And do regular ass Democrats bring out huge turnouts? No, they don't. So I have a lot to say about that. I'm going to obviously stir the pot on this. But first, I want to give a huge shout out. A huge shout out to everybody who's contributed to the show, specifically to the GoFundMe for equipment to upgrade the quality of the show. We have raised over $1,000 at this point. I've had an incredibly generous donor, and so I want to give you guys an update on the equipment, so you guys don't think I'm just taking the money and doing whatever with it. So I'm technically in some sort of a housing situation. I don't have a place. I have to move. I'm staying in my sister's. I have to move at the end of the month, and so I'm still trying to figure all that out, make sure I have the money. And as you guys know, the rent keeps raising through the roof. So the prices are out of control. So I really, before I spend any money on buying equipment, which I'm definitely going to do, I need to make sure that I can move into a place. Because if I spend money on equipment and studio equipment with no studio, then I will be out of a lot of money, and I'd have nowhere to record, and I'd have to figure out where the fuck I'm gonna get a place to stay. So that is an update on the equipment. The equipment upgrade is coming. I promise you that. I promise you that we're gonna upgrade the equipment, new laptops so we can live stream. I'm going to, with a new laptop, I can do interviews because this shit is not working. I cannot. You guys have seen me go on other shows. It's a different process. It's a lot simpler. My computer cannot handle hosting interviews and definitely not live stream. So if I get a new computer, I'll definitely be able to do all those things. A lot of other upgrades I'm planning on bringing to the show. So I just want to let you guys know that I am working on that. But first, the housing situation I really need to figure that out. So all the links in the description box, in the about page. And again, I'm incredibly grateful for all the people who have shown support, and it really means a lot, especially some of the more generous donors to this, like I said, this campaign for new equipment, because that shows me that you guys really appreciate the work that I'm doing, so much so that you will help me get the equipment to make the show even better. That's how much you believe in the work that I'm doing here. So, I mean, I say it all the time, but I'm more grateful than I could even put into words. So, like I said, all those links are in the description. I'm incredibly grateful, and I will be reading comments, and I always read all the comments. I always say that, but I need to be better at responding. But anyway, now back to the topic of this video, which is the Nina Turner loss. Okay, so let's get to some of the excuses that people were throwing out, and they were just like so. The first one is this idea that it was dark money that caused her to lose the race. Again, Nina Turner was raising historic amounts of money in this race. She was out raising everybody in this race. We don't have the final numbers in yet, but she raised over $4 million in a couple months. And she definitely raised more than Chantel Brown's campaign did by itself. But when you factor in all the ad buys from different dark money groups and corporate PACs and all that stuff, then it boosts up the amount of money that was spent on her side of the race. But even still, that just might barely surpass Nina Turner. And if it does surpass it by a couple $100,000 or even $1 million, that's not like an insurmountable thing. That shouldn't cost you a race. That shouldn't make you lose by like 9 percentage points. So I'm not really buying that argument. And I think that's an easy out for people because, especially in this space, it's easy to point to oh, it's the corporate money, it's the dark money, and everybody just throw their hands up and act like, what can we do? We told you that the election system is corrupt and money rules and you can buy elections and all that stuff. And yes, all those things is true. Money in politics is number one issue in this country. But that being said, like I said, what was spent in this race was not an insurmountable hurdle. Many other people have run and won in much tougher races when they were outspent way more. So this is absolutely no excuse for this type of shitty showing for Nina Turner. For example, AOC was outraised like 3-1 by Joe Crowley, if not more than that. And on top of that, she was running against Joe Crowley, one of the most powerful Democrats in the entire country, head of the Queen's Democratic Party, a juggernaut in New York politics, and she was just a nobody who with no name recognition. And she still beat Joe Crowley's ass, damn near blew him out. So the money thing, it's an easy cop out, and if you just look into it a little bit, it doesn't add up. Paula Jean Swearinger, she didn't win her race against Joe Manchin, but Joe Manchin outraised Paula Jean Swearinger well over 10-1 in a race, and she didn't win, but she got like 43% of the vote. And again, this is somebody with no name recognition against an incumbent senator with all the name recognition in the state. So it is, the money isn't like the be all end all. That's not the end of the discussion. Oh, who raised the most money, especially running against people allegedly pretending to like represent the working class and populists and the working class revolution. The money, the campaign you run, as we've seen, can override the money that is spent if you run a good campaign. And to bring it back to Nina Turner's campaign, she did not run a good campaign. She had the most name recognition in the race by far, not even close. National profile, co-chair of Bernie Sanders' campaign, helped him run in 2016. President of our revolution, this national figure, and of course she had her own career in Cleveland politics, in Ohio politics before then, so she had local name recognition too. So she's clearly the front runner. She clearly has all the advantage in this race. She was outraising Chantel Brown. And so you mean to tell me because people bought a couple of dollars in ads towards the end of the race, that cost them to turn the race? No, it was because she ran the bad campaign, and I'll get to the specifics of the shitty campaign that she ran. Another point is this whole, the people are trying to excuse that people are making, is that in this one, it's like, oh, let me just find this one thing that isn't a real harsh and necessary criticism of Nina Turner. It's just like some little minutia thing that I can just say, oh, at least I'm not completely scapegoating and taking all the blame off Nina Turner. And so they're trying to say, oh, she spent money, it wasn't in the best way, she should have saved some more money so she could buy more ads toward the end. I'm not buying that because I don't think, okay, maybe that would have moved, she ended up losing by like 4,000 votes. Maybe you would have moved it around a couple hundred, maybe like 1,000, 2,000. But you're playing at the margins here. And again, when you're in a district where there's like 500,000 eligible voters and only like 80,000 people show up, 70,000 people show up, the huge elephant in the room is that there wasn't a giant turnout when there could have been. And so you can talk about how she spent the money, she spent too much too early or whatever, she could have bought more ads toward the end. Okay, would that have drawn out another 10,000 people, another 15,000 people? No way in hell it would have. So the only way to increase the turnout, or where you can isolate what it is to get more turnout or what caused the turnout to be so low, you have to look at how the campaign was run and whether or not it reached people and inspired them and moved them to get out. And clearly it didn't. So my criticisms, one of the criticisms I made in the very first video I did on this race was criticizing the fact that she ran as a Democrat. And no, it wasn't possible for her to run on the MPP ticket because they aren't registered yet in the state, but she could have run as an independent. And here's the reason why. And it ties back into the point that I made at the beginning about how she ran a shitty campaign because she chose to ignore the criticisms of the people were making to her left. And so when I say that, people are misinterpreting that to mean, oh, Nina Turner needs to listen to everything I say or everything that people online that agree with me say. Oh, and that overrides everything else. That overrides what the people in her district might want. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying, the points that I make are pointing to a larger problem, which is this subservience to the Democratic Party and this unwillingness to be adversarial to the Democrats, even though they are the main obstacle to the policy agenda that she claims to support. So what that means is, yeah, it doesn't mean that the voters in the district, if you go there and ask them about forced to vote, they have some strong opinion on it. It doesn't mean if you go there and ask them about the infrastructure bill or the Biden stimulus bill, they have like some strong opinion on how the Justice Democrats should have used their leverage and how Nina Turner should have pressured. They don't have a strong opinion on that, and I'm not saying that they do. What I'm saying is the people who are informed, the people who are following it, like myself, all these different events, all these different updates that are going on in politics right now. My reading of the situation, my analysis is she's not challenging power. And I can give you all the details, all the specifics of the details why, but that's the root of it. She's not challenging power. And the way that translates to regular people is, it doesn't mean that they all have the same exact detailed opinion I do, but they might all see the same shit that I do, but they might not be able to express it in the words that I can. So we all agree that regular Democrats don't increase turnout. They don't drive turnout. So if you run a campaign as regular Democrat, all the people in the district, you aren't going to get their attention. You aren't going to really say anything to fire them up and inspire them to come out. And so that is the problem here. And that's what went unaddressed. And had Nina Turner addressed the criticisms about forced to vote and about not challenging the Democratic leadership, and had she internalized them and actually tried to change course and be more adversarial, then she would have gotten a lot more attention to people on the ground than if she were calling up the Democratic Party and saying, hey, Joe Biden has the ability to give everybody healthcare in this country by signing an executive order and declaring a national emergency and providing using a provision in a bill to expand Medicaid to everybody in the country by declaring a national disaster. She could have gone knocked on every door and said, it's Joe Biden's fault that you don't have healthcare right now. That would have excited a lot of people. And to think that, oh, somebody's going to go there and challenge Joe Biden and pressure him to do what he can do to provide healthcare, to provide single payer in this country. If she was going around making that case and actually challenging power, we all see, if there was any lesson to learn from 2016, it's when people see you challenge the establishment and challenge the status quo, you will excite people, you will attract people. So had Nina Turner been doing that, they might not have been to give you all the minutia of force to vote, but they can tell when somebody's fighting for them. And what Nina Turner did, trying to pander to centrists and say, oh, I'm a good, loyal Democrat. I like Barack Obama too. I'm not going to say bad things about Joe Biden either. When you did all of that, people didn't get the impression that you were going to fight, challenge the status quo. You weren't going to fight for them. So again, you didn't drive that insane turnout that Bernie Sanders did in 2016. So again, that was a completely a strategic failure on behalf of the Nina Turner campaign. And it's her fault for having Jeff Weaver anywhere near her campaign and then going ahead and listening to him when he tells her to pander to Biden voters. And so this kind of gets to another thing that I want to just say to wrap this all up, which is the criticism or the defense of Nina Turner. Oh, she had to do this centrist bullshit. She had to pander to the centrists because it's a moderate district and they all voted for Joe Biden and they voted for Hillary Clinton before then. So you have to pander to them and you can't tell them the truth about how the Democrats are actually an obstacle to any policy that would improve their lives. You can't tell them the truth. You have to lie to them and talk to them like they're stupid and pretend like the Democrats are great. And you have to do that because it's a moderate district. And I 100% disagree with that on so many levels. One, you can make that argument literally in every district in the country because they all elect corporate Democrats. In any election, almost any election, they either have or currently elected corporate Democrats. If you said that about AOC and Joe Crowley, it's a moderate district, you have to run as a moderate, you have to pander to the moderates, don't do all of this political revolution talk, don't talk about single payer healthcare, don't talk about corporate greed, all that stuff. That's too radical. You have to pander to the centrists. You could literally transpose that same shitty argument into any race where Justice Democrat beat an incumbent. So I think that's dumb on face value and intellectually inconsistent. The issue of voter turnout. Had Nina Turner brought 10,000 more people out, she would have won. And the fact that she didn't do that and she was doing that centrist bullshit should be an indication to people that, hey, maybe that strategy doesn't work. But people are acting as if it's a non-falsifiable claim that moderate district, they elected Joe Biden. That means you can never say anything critical about Joe Biden. Because here's the thing. Like I said, they act like this is a non-falsifiable claim. Because had Nina Turner won doing this little pandering to the moderates bullshit, then everybody would have been doing a victory lap saying, haha, we don't have to listen to you crazy radical leftists online. We can pander to the centrists because that's what it takes to win elections. That's what they all would have been saying. That's what Jordan Sheridan would have been saying and all the rest of them. Now that Nina Turner lost doing that shitty strategy, it's still, oh no, the strategy's right. It's everything else. So you mean the core strategy of the campaign, whether it wins, it's a brilliant strategy. If it loses, it's a brilliant strategy, and we just have to keep repeating the strategy to the end of time, and at no point can we question whether or not it works. That's completely ridiculous, and again, this should show you that pandering to centrists doesn't work. We all agree with it. That we all say that's why corporate Democrats lose to Republicans all the time, because they're trying to pander to the base of the Republicans and abandoning their own base, telling them to kick rocks, and at the end of the day, you try to do this fence riding bullshit and you end up with not enough support to win. And that's exactly what happened with Nina Turner. So again, people aren't internalizing what happened. They aren't trying to be introspective. I actually have a whole video I want to do about Mike Figueredo from the Humanist Report, where he fucking throws a temper tantrum on Twitter and tries to blame me for Nina Turner losing her election and then blocks me. And after getting ratioed to fucking oblivion. So I'll play I'll do a whole other video about that. So let me know what you guys think about this Nina Turner race. And I know you guys don't give a fuck about electoral politics, but this is I think it should be a teaching moment to tell people to get off the fucking crack pipe of this electoral strategy. But as always, water off a duck's back, and they're just hell-bent on continuing to do the same thing. Let's continue to raise millions of dollars. Let's raise another $4 million and set that on fire and do it again. Let's raise a whole other $300 million to elect a bunch of progressives that don't do shit. And again, it's bizarre to me that people aren't that there are still a sizable chunk of people who haven't given up on this futile effort of taking over the Democratic Party.